It's 2025, and a $500 consumer drone, the kind your neighbor uses to film their backyard barbecue, has suddenly become a weapon capable of destroying $1 million tank. Sounds like science fiction? Yes, but welcome to the Ukrainian battlefield, where the rules of warfare didn't just change. They exploded into 1,000 pieces and were reassembled by engineers with YouTube tutorials and 3D printers. And just to see how crazy it has become, join us as we dive deep into how Russia and Ukraine didn't just fight a war, they fast-forwarded the future of combat by decades. From DIY death machines to AI-powered swarms, this is the story of how the sky became the most dangerous place on Earth. Buckle up, because what you're about to discover will redefine everything you thought you knew about modern warfare. Part 1. The sky wasn't always this dangerous. Before February 2022, drones were the exclusive toys of superpowers and Hollywood blockbusters. Sure, the United States had been perfecting the art of remote assassination with Predator and Reaper drones across the Middle East for over 2 decades, basically turning terrorist leaders into targets on a chessboard operated from Nevada bunkers. But these were $17 million flying fortresses, elite weapons for elite wars. A good example is the Turkish Bayraktar TB2, which has made some waves in Syria and Libya, proving that mid-tier military powers could also play the drone game. At $5 million apiece, they were still expensive enough that only serious military forces could afford them. These weren't weapons you'd see flooding battlefields by the hundreds. In fact, most military strategists viewed drones as specialized tools, perfect for surveillance, precision strikes against high-value targets, or operations where human pilots were too valuable to risk. They were force multipliers at best, not force replacements. Basically, in 2022, the average infantry soldier still carried the same basic kit that hadn't fundamentally changed since World War II: rifle, ammunition, radio, and the hope that artillery wouldn't find them first. Don't get me wrong, electronic warfare existed, but it was a sophisticated game played between major powers with billion-dollar budgets and PhD-level engineers. GPS jamming, signal intercepts, and cyber warfare were the domain of nation-states, not basement tinkerers with soldering irons and bad intentions. Then came February 24th, 2002. Russia's invasion of Ukraine didn't just trigger the largest conventional war in Europe since 1945, it absolutely ripped open a portal to a future where every soldier carries death in their backpack, where commercial off-the-shelf technology became military-grade overnight, and where the distinction between civilian and military hardware dissolves like sugar in rain. The skies above Ukraine became a proving ground for technologies that weren't supposed to exist outside of defense contractor laboratories. And somehow, within months, warfare transformed from a profession requiring years of training into something a teenager could master with a week of practice and a credit card. So here's the question: why? Well, we'll get to that soon, but for now, know that what happened next didn't just change military doctrine, it shattered it entirely, replacing ancient strategies with tactics so new that generals are still writing the rulebook while the bullets fly. The sky wasn't always this dangerous, but once Ukraine opened Pandora's box, there was no closing it again. Part 2. David versus Goliath: Ukraine's DIY drone revolution. When Russian armor came rolling across the border, Ukraine faced a brutal mathematical reality. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outspent by a factor that would make any reasonable military planner surrender before breakfast. But Ukraine didn't follow the reasonable playbook. Rather, they wrote a completely new one using duct tape, desperation, and an unhealthy obsession with consumer electronics. Let me explain. The revolution started in electronic stores and hobby shops. Ukrainian defenders grabbed DJI Mavic drones, the same quadcopters wedding photographers use, stripped them down, and turned them into flying grenades. And just like that, a $1,200 commercial drone carrying a $50 improvised explosive began to disable a $3 million Russian armored vehicle. The math was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. But this wasn't just military innovation. This was a national crowdsourcing project that would make Silicon Valley jealous. Overnight, civilians launched fundraising campaigns to buy drones for their local defenders. Engineers working in tech companies by day spent their nights 3D printing drone modifications and grenade attachments. Teenagers who'd grown up racing FPV drones suddenly found their hobby skills had become instruments of national defense. Everyone was either an engineer, a military financier, or a pilot, and it all happened overnight. Now, as you would expect, the Ukrainian military embraced this chaos with the enthusiasm of a startup company disrupting a trillion-dollar industry. They created entire units dedicated to drone warfare, training soldiers not just to pilot these flying weapons, but to modify, repair, and innovate with them in real time. Traditional military hierarchies bent to accommodate drone operators who'd learned their skills on YouTube rather than in military academies. Then came the Bayraktar TB2, and Ukraine didn't just use it, they turned it into a cultural phenomenon. Literally. Folk songs celebrated their victories, social media accounts tracked their kills. The drone became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance and technological superiority over a supposedly superior enemy. But perhaps most psychologically devastating was how these drones changed the nature of fear on the battlefield. Russian soldiers were accustomed to the traditional sounds of war. We're talking artillery shells whistling overhead, tank engines rumbling, and gunfire singing lullabies. But now, they had to contend with the mosquito-like buzz of small drones that could appear from any direction at any time. The trenches that had provided safety for over a century became death traps monitored by eyes in the sky. Ukrainian forces didn't just adapt to drone warfare, they pioneered tactics that military academies are still trying to understand. They created hunter-killer teams where cheap reconnaissance drones would spot targets for more expensive strike zones. They developed swarm tactics using modified commercial drones that could overwhelm air defenses through sheer numbers rather than sophisticated technology. Ukraine didn't just fight back against the Russian invasion. They hacked the sky itself, turned consumer technology into military advantage, and proving that innovation, not just budget, determines victory. They had brought a Call of Duty kill streak to life, and with it, they showed the world that the future of warfare wouldn't necessarily belong to whoever spent the most money, but to whoever could adapt the fastest and think the most creatively. That is, until Russia caught on. Part 3. Russia Strikes Back. The Industrial Drone Surge. Without sugarcoating, Russia's early drone blindness was spectacular and embarrassing. I mean, a military that prided itself on advanced technology and massive defense budgets found itself getting humiliated by modified DJI drones flown by Ukrainian farmers and IT workers. But if there's one thing Russia knows how to do, it's adapt to existential threats with the subtlety of a sledgehammer and the persistence of a glacier. The response came in waves, each more sophisticated and terrifying than the last. First, Russia dusted off its existing drone programs and put them into mass production. And almost immediately, the Orlan 10 reconnaissance drones, previously used in limited numbers, suddenly appeared by the hundreds. Now, these weren't elegant solutions. They looked like flying lawnmowers and used commercial camera equipment, but they worked, and Russia could build them faster than Ukraine could shoot them down. Then, more ominously, the Lancet loitering munitions began appearing on battlefields. These weren't traditional drones, but flying bombs designed to loiter over target areas before diving into tanks, artillery pieces, and supply depots with surgical precision. Costing around $35,000 each, they kind of became a middle ground between cheap improvised weapons and expensive military hardware. But more than anything, Russia's masterstroke was embracing the Iranian Shahed 136 Kamikaze drones. These flying lawnmowers of death cost only $20,000 each, but could carry enough explosives to destroy power substations, bridges, and civilian infrastructure hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. And more importantly, and scarier, they came in swarms. Basically, when Ukraine shot down 10 Shaheds, Russia launched 20. When they shot down 20, Russia launched 50. The genius was in the economics. Ukraine was using million-dollar surface-to-air missiles to intercept $20,000 drones. Russia was forcing its enemy to go bankrupt through simple mathematics, turning expensive air defense systems into cost-ineffective solutions for a low-cost threat. But they didn't stop there. Russia also began fighting fire with fire, deploying its own modified commercial drones for reconnaissance and attack missions. Russian engineers proved they could be just as creative as their Ukrainian counterparts, developing everything from drone-dropped anti-personnel mines to suicide drones that could hunt for specific electromagnetic signatures. Sounds like sci-fi, yes. Deadly, you have no idea. But perhaps most significantly, Russia weaponized its electronic warfare capabilities against this new drone threat. Faster than anyone expected, massive jamming systems began appearing on the battlefield, creating dead zones where GPS signals disappeared and drone operators lost control of their aircraft. Russian forces deployed everything from handheld drone jammers to truck-mounted systems capable of disrupting communications across entire sectors of the front. The adaptation was ruthless and methodical. Russia went from drone illiterate to drone native in less than 18 months, transforming its military doctrine to embrace unmanned systems at every level. They created dedicated drone units, established training programs, and most importantly, began creating drone warfare not as a supporting capability, but as a primary combat method. Russia didn't just catch up, they industrialized drone warfare, proving that when sufficiently motivated, even traditional military hierarchies could evolve at startup speed. So what happened next? Part 4. The birth of the drone battlefield. What emerged from the collision of Ukrainian innovation and Russian industrialization wasn't just a new type of warfare. It was a complete reimagining of what battlefields look like in the 21st century. Trenches returned, but these weren't your grandfather's World War I dugouts. These were fortifications designed for an enemy that could see everything, attack from any angle, and strike without warning from miles away. Infantry tactics underwent a revolutionary transformation. Soldiers learned to move in ways that would minimize their thermal and visual signatures from above. Traditional formations became suicide pacts when any group of more than 2 people could be spotted by reconnaissance drones and destroyed by strike drones within minutes. The battlefield became a game of constant hide-and-seek with death machines in the sky. The concept of safe areas evaporated entirely. Supply convoys, command posts, and maintenance facilities that had been relatively secure just miles behind front lines became primary targets for long-range drone strikes. Military logistics, already complex, became a 3-dimensional chess game where every route and timing had to account for aerial surveillance and strike capabilities. Electronic warfare evolved from a specialized capability into a basic survival skill. Every unit needed jamming equipment, signal detection gear, and operators trained to fight the invisible battle of the electromagnetic spectrum. The sky filled not just with drones, but with competing radio signals, GPS spoofing attempts, and cyber warfare attacks that could turn friendly drones into enemy weapons. Perhaps most remarkably, traditional airpower hierarchies began crumbling. Fighter jets and helicopters designed to dominate airspace found themselves threatened by swarms of cheap drones that cost less than a single missile but could overwhelm even sophisticated air defense systems through sheer numbers. Somehow, million-dollar aircraft began avoiding areas controlled by $1,000 drones. But that wasn't all. The drone battlefield also democratized precision strike capabilities. Previously, only major military powers could conduct surgical strikes against high-value targets. Now, small units with commercial drones and improvised explosives could achieve the same effects as cruise missiles, but for a fraction of the cost and with far greater flexibility. Artillery, the king of the battlefield for over a century, suddenly became vulnerable. Traditional counter-battery fire, which relied on detecting muzzle flashes or radar signatures, became obsolete when drones could spot artillery positions through direct visual observation and guide precision strikes onto them within minutes of firing. Infantry began carrying anti-drone weapons as standard equipment. Everything from jamming devices to shotguns loaded with specialized ammunition designed to destroy small flying targets. The individual soldier's load, already heavy with traditional equipment, expanded to include electronic warfare gear that would have been science fiction just years earlier. Most importantly, the battlefield became a laboratory for artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. Like a movie, drones began using machine learning to identify and track targets, navigate through jamming, and coordinate attacks with minimal human input. The line between human-controlled and autonomous weapons began blurring as operators became supervisors rather than pilots. This wasn't just a new weapon being added to existing warfare. It was warfare itself evolving into something unrecognizable, where success belonged to whoever could adapt fastest to an environment where everything was visible, everything was vulnerable, and death could come from any direction at any time. So, where does that leave us? Part 5. The future was just fast-forwarded. Ukraine didn't just change warfare. It gave the entire world a terrifying preview of conflicts to come, and every military on Earth is taking notes, with the urgency of students cramming for an exam that determines their nation's survival. To show you this, let's look at NATO's headquarters in Brussels, which has become a 24/7 analysis center, with military planners dissecting every Ukrainian drone innovation and Russian countermeasure. The alliance's entire doctrine is being rewritten around the assumption that future conflicts will be fought primarily by unmanned systems. Training programs that once focused on traditional combined arms warfare now dedicate equal time to drone operations and electronic warfare. China, never one to miss a technological trend in military applications, has accelerated its drone development programs to warp speed. Their military-industrial complex is churning out everything from small reconnaissance drones to massive unmanned bombers, while Chinese defense companies are flooding global markets with cheap, effective drone systems that make military-grade technology accessible to smaller nations and non-state actors. Israel, already a leader in unmanned systems, has taken Ukrainian lessons and applied them to urban warfare scenarios, so much so that their latest operations showcase drone swarms are capable of navigating complex urban environments, coordinating attacks, and adapting to threats in real time with minimal human oversight. But the most terrifying implication isn't what major military powers are doing. It's how this technology is spreading to everyone else. The same commercial components powering Ukrainian battlefield innovations are available on Amazon. The software tutorials that taught Ukrainian engineers to weaponize civilian drones are freely available on YouTube. The barrier to entry for drone warfare has collapsed from millions of dollars and years of development to thousands of dollars and weeks of learning. Terrorist organizations, criminal cartels, and rogue states are all studying the Ukrainian playbook with the enthusiasm of franchise owners learning a proven business model. The techniques that helped Ukraine resist a superpower invasion could just as easily be turned against civilian infrastructure, democratic institutions, or peaceful populations. We're witnessing the democratization of precision warfare, where asymmetric conflicts will be fought not with improvised explosives and small arms, but with swarms of AI-guided drones that can see everything, strike anything, and disappear without a trace. In Ukraine, the future of war didn't evolve. It exploded into existence, fully formed and absolutely lethal. The only question now is whether humanity can adapt to controlling these technologies before they control us. What do you think? What's your take on this drone revolution? Are we witnessing the democratization of warfare or the birth of something far more dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And by the way, if this deep dive into the future of warfare got your gears turning, smash that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the technologies reshaping our world. Until next time, keep watching the skies. They're more dangerous than ever.